Only fitting we play that video intro this week because we had the 3 player representatives, I guess, players themselves or family representatives of the inaugural Ring of Honor class for the Cincinnati Bengals in that little intro. It's a big week in Cincinnati for a number of reasons, honoring that initial class of Ring of Honor recipients, as well as a lot of interesting people in town for the game and a primetime game on TV. I'm Anthony Cosenza with the Orange and Black Insider, coming at you at a special time on Wednesday evening, joined by my partner in crime, John Sheeran. John, what's up, buddy?
Yeah, good timing for the entire Bengals fandom nation to kind of all congregate in Cincinnati. It'd be kind of awkward if they left Pittsburgh with a blown lead there, I guess. So, yeah, they couldn't really time this any better.
Yeah. So we've had an insanely busy week, not only on this show, but on CincyJungle.com. We've had, water cooler chat on this show. We had JP Acosta from SB Nation's Big Cat Country join us to preview the game. We have this show. We're going to have a fantasy football show. We're going to have a post-game show and the slew of articles, updates on CincyJungle.com. So we have had an extremely busy week on a short week, but it's been fun. And there's a lot of our colleagues, a lot of our Cincy Jungle brethren in Cincinnati on hand for this game. It's a pretty cool week. We're going to talk about the Bengals hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars on Thursday Night Football at Paul Brown Stadium and all the festivities going on there. We have a State Your Case this week, a soundbite of the week, and of course, we're going to break down the big win by the Cincinnati Bengals over the Pittsburgh Steelers. And in case you're new to this program, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel right under John's left shoulder there. There's a little box. You can click on that, subscribe, and click that bell to get notified when we go live and when new material is available. All of our stuff is on every major audio streamer, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio. All of the major ones were there. So subscribe and leave us a review if you could. That would help us out, whether it's for our show, Orange is the New Black from Ace and Zim, Matt Minnick's Chalk Talk, any of those. We appreciate the support. How you subscribe, leaving us a review, all that good stuff. All right, let's get right to it now that some of that housekeeping stuff is out of the way. John, Bengals win a big one and win one pretty handily at Heinz Field, 24-10. It wasn't always pretty. There were some moments that were very frustrating late in the game, but overall, the Bengals take care of business against their rivals and do so, beating them by 2 touchdowns.
It wasn't just like the gimmick stuff from last December, right? It was the Steelers mostly healthy, mostly them with high expectations for themselves, and the Bengals with their expected plan, with most of their starters available, going into a place that they haven't won since 2015. They haven't won by more than 10 points since before I was alive. It means a lot. And I think during the game when they were up by like 24-7 or 24-10, like right before I guess Boswell missed that field goal, I'm like, okay, this is the part of the game where usually the Bengals will give up some points and kind of let the Steelers come back a little bit, and then the score will look a little bit closer than what the game actually was. But then it didn't happen, and I think part of that was just because like this Bengals team, despite their flaws, despite their still questionable coaching inadequacies and just their questionable game plan early on this year, that they're just better than this team right now. And that is very indicative of just how the last, 6 or 7 games for the Steelers has been going back to last season, and how the Bengals looked against them last season, and just the overall decline of that once successful franchise that's now entering a potentially very dark period for them. But it's also kind of the upswing of just the Bengals in comparison. Like, there's still a lot of questions about this Bengals team, but I think right now it's very clear what the dynamic with this rivalry is. It's very much back to being competitive like it was in the early 2010s.
If you go on ESPN, Stephen A. Smith, Ryan Clark, known Steelers homers, Ryan Clark played for the team. They are in a bit of a state of, I mean, disappointment is definitely one of them, but really kind of scared for the state of the franchise, as you kind of said, in terms of what's the succession plan beyond Ben Roethlisberger. Is Ben Roethlisberger officially washed up in his career? Is he at the very, very, very end of a great Hall of Fame career? What's next for the Steelers? All of those have kind of been the narrative. And the Bengals, hey, good win for them, was kind of was on the back burner. I'm going to play, we usually do this as a little bit of a standalone segment, but I think it ties in well to one of the talking points for this game, John. I'm going to play, I'm sure a lot of people have seen this at this point, Tyler Boyd talking about what he saw at the end of this game against the Steelers. This is courtesy of Joe Daneman of Fox 19 and numerous other Cincinnati media outlets, Steelers media outlets. It's pretty readily available. So if you haven't heard it yet, it's been out there for a couple of days. This was Tyler Boyd on Monday talking about an uncharacteristic type of personality from the Pittsburgh Steelers in this game.
The thing about that win was not only did the Steelers feel that, everybody in the country felt it, because the last plays of the game for them, they gave up. You could see it. They had 3 drops in a row, and that's, for a team to see that, is giving us more power, giving us the antidote to know how good we are, you know. So for a team to just lay down like that before the game is over, because no matter what, no matter how much we're losing by or whatever the case may be, I know me and I know us, we're not giving up. We're going to continue to try to make plays and make something happen. But they portrayed it to the whole nation on TV with what they were about and how they gave up. So, I mean, we just got to take advantage.
So a number of set of questions that could come from this, John. My first impression of it personally was that, look, the Bengals in years past have had guys that would kind of run their mouth a little bit, whether it was in the mid 2000s with that flashy team with Ocho and Carson and all of them. And, you know, the Hushmanzada wiping his cleats with the towel and all that kind of stuff. There was a lot of that. And unfortunately, at times, there wasn't a lot of substance to back up some of that flash and that trash talk with the Bengals in this rivalry. I kind of take, if this was one of basically like 3 people on the Bengals roster, that's who I would take a sentiment like this seriously from. One would be Mike Hilton. The other would be Sean Davis, who played for the Steelers. And the other is Tyler Boyd, who grew up in Pittsburgh, played football in Pittsburgh at the University of Pittsburgh, grew up a Steeler fan. So for him to say this kind of bears a lot of weight. I want to get your opinion on that. And I got to kind of want to follow that up with what we were just kind of talking about. Is this kind of a turning point for the Cincinnati Bengals and Zach Taylor with this win? Or is this kind of nothing more than, hey, Bengals taking advantage of a lesser talented Steelers team, a couple of key injuries on their side of the ball, and good win, but let's not take too much stock in it. What do you make of those 2 points?
I think you brought up a good point with Tyler Boyd being amongst that group, not just because of his connections with the Steelers, but I mean, he's been with this team for longer than most players on this roster. He has seen this exact game go the opposite way against this exact team. Like, just look at last year when they were at Pittsburgh. That game was a blowout, and I think you could make the argument that, you know, I'm not sure that the Bengals really fought to the end in that one. Like, this has happened before, only this time the script was flipped. So he knows what that feels like on the other end of it, so he can definitely identify it when he sees it in front of him. And if he sees it, then we all could see it too. Like, that was extremely evident. There was nothing that the Steelers could do in this game to keep up with the Bengals. And it's not like the Bengals were an offensive juggernaut. They had a couple of good drives. They scored off short fields on 2 turnovers, but, you know, they gave the Steelers chances to come back in this game, and the Steelers could not answer on offense outside of just 2 really long drives that I think both ended in a combined like 3 points. Like, they were answerless. Their only answer was Najee Harris throwing to him 15 times a game out wide, and that ended up being their answer on 4th and 10 for some god awful reason. So I think that leads into just how this game is, like, what the narrative is, I guess. Like, it does feel like the Steelers just collapsed and realized all of their deficiencies in 1 week. Not saying that the Bengals didn't play well. The defense is still dominant right now. It's still clicking on all cylinders. The offense has that new dimension of an explosive vertical threat on the outside. Again, for the 3rd straight week, it's very evident that that's part of this offense. And they're run blocking really well against, even though they had some injuries on the defensive line, the Steelers play pretty sound football up front. And the Bengals offensive line just consistently got pushed against them. And Joe Mixon had his most efficient day of the season so far. They did some great things, but honestly, if Ben Roethlisberger doesn't look like a senior citizen, and if they have like maybe 1 or 2 more pass rushers, this game is probably closer. But the Steelers just flat out looked dead out there. And I think that was probably the biggest reason why this game ended up what it was.
That's and part of that, I think, has to do with some of the personnel losses, but I think they just maybe ran into a different Bengals team, a more aggressive Bengals team. And really the last 2 times the Bengals and the Steelers have played each other, the Bengals have taken it to them. and that's with Ryan Finley at quarterbacking one of them and Joe Burrow quarterbacking this one. I like what you said about what the offense was. There was kind of a Jekyll and Hyde effect with the Bengals offense in this game, namely the fact that, and where I thought this game was won, John, on at least for the Bengals offense, were the couple of drives sandwiched around halftime. And if you remember in the Minnesota game in week 1, the Bengals scored a touchdown right before halftime, came out and scored more points again after halftime as they received the ball. The same thing happened here, 10 points right before and combined right before and after halftime. Really kind of made a big, big difference. Yes, you can point to a number of big plays by Logan Wilson and the defense and holding strong and not allowing points and whatnot. But I thought that was a major storyline in this game that, yeah, it's talked about a little bit, but not really as much as some of the Jamar Chase plays and whatnot. It's the fact that the Bengals were able to get those 10 points around halftime. I think that made a big difference and was a big gut punch to the Steelers.
It's going back to Coach Minnick's philosophy, just winning the middle 8, those final 4 minutes in the first half and the first 4 minutes of the second half. But that was also just a thought in my mind, like, going into halftime tied against the Steelers for the last 15 years, that is an absolute win for this team. Not this time. Not when you have guys like Jamar Chase on the outside and a guy like Joe Burrow that can execute a flawless 2-minute drill. A 2-minute drill that probably should have included 2 30-yard passes if Boyd didn't drop it over the middle on the same concept that they ended up getting the 34-yard touchdown with. But that was such an eye-opener for me. It just continued to validate, I think, the overall aggressiveness that Zach Taylor has in these situations where, you have 2 minutes left, you have 2 timeouts. I made the observation, like, during the game, like, Marvin Lewis is already walking to the locker room in that situation. Yeah. Like, he's running the ball. Yeah. He's taking the tie. He's taking the ball at the start of the second half. Not this time. Not when you have this offense. Not when you have this offense that goes against the traditional mantra of how to compete in the AFC North, run the ball, play solid defense. No, we're going to provide explosion against you, and we're going to take advantage of your bad cornerbacks on the outside, and we're going to throw up the ball to Jamar Chase because he's telling Joe Burrow in the huddle, just throw it up and I'll go get it. And that made such a huge mental impact, I think, in this game. And then they got the field goal at the start of the second half and continued to pour on.
A great game by Jamar Chase, showing both the explosive ability, getting the long touchdown catch, and then the shorter one, 9 yards, and doing some of the work that T. Higgins would do in the red zone in that shorter yardage work. But great game by him, 2 touchdowns. He's got 4 in the first 3 games. I think what broke Randy Moss's rookie record for the youngest receiver to get 4 touchdowns in his first 3 games, that sort of thing, and just continues to be everything and more as advertised. Interesting thing you bring up, though, John. And I there were a lot of nice things to like about the offense. Joe Mixon, 5 yards per carry. Jackson Carman, the highest rated Pro Football Focus pass protector on the Bengals offensive line in his first start against the Steelers on the road. I mean, there's a lot of things that you like about this one. However, there were 3 drives in the game on offense at the end of the game, towards the end of the third quarter and into the fourth quarter. One at the end of the fourth quarter was a little bit kind of like, wow, this is just kind of grind the clock time. But the Bengals had a real chance at a lot of different points in this game to just really slam the door, get a couple of first downs, do some different things. So as great of a play call, and as much as we want to applaud Zach Taylor, Joe Burrow and company for the aggressiveness right before the half and whatnot, there were some questionable decisions in terms of play calls and things of that nature on these 3 drives I'm talking about. They had, I believe, anywhere from 14 to 17-point leads on those drives there. And they went 9 plays for 21 yards, no first downs. They had a penalty, and they ran a couple of empty concepts at times where you go, well, Joe Mixon is getting a lot of yards per carry here in more traditional. So what are we doing here? Right. I mean, it just kind of felt like that was maybe more grind the clock time, and maybe it's nitpicky at this point, but that's one thing on offense where I think a lot of people go, what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, you just look at the second half drive sheet, right? You had the field goal to start. You had Logan Wilson's second interception of the game, which led to a 3-play drive that had Jamar Chase's second touchdown of the game. Steelers miss a field goal, then the Bengals punt with a combined, I believe, 13 plays. So they got 1 first down in those 3 drives, compared to the Steelers, who, this is a mind-blowing stat, and their 2 drives sandwiched in between those 3 punts, They ran 34
40.
plays.
Yeah.
34 plays and got 3 points off of it. The defense deserves all the credit in the world for the biggest bend and don't break job of their life on those 2 drives. But yeah, the offense didn't do them any favors. And that's part of why Joe Burrow only threw the ball like 18 times and Joe Mixon ran it 18 times. Yes, they were efficient in the times that they did score, but they didn't sustain drives and they didn't do the defense any favors at all. So even though there's still maybe some minor questions with this defense, is it actually as legit as the numbers say because of the offenses that they've gone up against? They haven't got a lot of favors from their offense in comparison. Like just last week when they had to deal with the complete ineptitude against the Bears and they did their absolute best to keep that game close. And in this game, even though the Steelers were dead on offense, aside from Najee Harris catching the ball, they didn't get any breaks in the second half when the Steelers were trying to come back.
So I guess if we want to end on a better note, the Bengals defense played pretty well. Like you said, they ultimate bend but don't break in those 2 drives at the end of the game. Logan Wilson having the 2 interceptions, the team getting by at cornerback with their 2 top cornerbacks out. I mean, Awuzie played a lot in this game, but he ended up leaving, may not play this week. We'll talk about that in a sec. But, the Bengals had been no T. Higgins, still win the game by 14 points. The defense is playing pretty well, particularly, John, that defensive line. Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard were just omnipresent, it would seem, off the edge in this game. Ogunjobi and the guys in the middle just are creating a really formidable rotation. BJ Hill, another sack. Just a lot of good play up front. And I think we're starting to kind of see the fruits of this, this mind's eye of Lou Anarumo that he's had for the past couple of years, where he's wanted this rotation up front. He's wanted to mix things up. And finally, he has the depth and the health on the defensive line to be able to do that.
It really does help when you play against an actual tree at quarterback. It was I was embarrassed for him. I honestly think like he should have pulled like Avonte Davis out there and just retire in the middle of the game. It's the reference to when Vontae Davis did that against the Bengals in the preseason with the Bills. Like it was dreadful. It was unlike any Ben Roethlisberger performance I've ever seen before. And he didn't play well at all last year in December, and especially towards this down the stretch for the Steelers season last year. But I mean, it's both. I think it's the fact that Ben has never been this just stationary and lack of mobility, which allowed the Bengals to finish a lot of those sacks that in the past, when they played that quarterback in that stadium, he would get out of the grasp of a lot of would-be sackers and extend some plays. But that is the difference, right? It's not only Trey Hendrickson winning at a high rate against the Steelers left tackle, or Sam Hubbard getting his first sack and a half against 2 Steelers right tackles, but it's the interior presence that was missing for at least a couple years now. Larry Ogunjobi, DJ Reader, BJ Hill continue to all play at a high level and take advantage of the youth of that Steelers interior. But that is usually the difference when you play the Steelers when they're at their best, right? It's the interior pressure that can get Ben off of his rocker and limit the amount of plays that he can extend. But at this point, I don't think there's anything left for him to do, even if there is no pass rush.
I agree with you. There were a couple of times. I mean, he made one play with his legs where he kind of had Logan Wilson make a decision, right, where he kind of like juked a little bit with the football, and it's like, am I either going to run it around you, or am I going to try and flip it over your head and put Logan Wilson in a real tough spot there? He ended up kind of faking the throw and running around it for a first down conversion. Other than that, it's not the same backyard football Ben Roethlisberger that we all have seen.
He tripped over air. He
did.
He fell on his own shoelaces. There was a banana peel out there.
It's like
get him out of there. Get him out of there.
Someone should have done the Mario Kart thing, throw a banana peel out there and slip and fall. Yeah. It was a very, for seeing this rivalry and its dynamic for so many years, and seeing the Bengals just trip over their own feet and do other things that kind of shoot themselves in the foot. They came out, they played well. One other thing that I want to say, John, I don't know if you noticed this. I put up a couple of clips on my Twitter account, just kind of rewatching the game briefly as I did an article for Cincy Jungle. There was some stuff up until the early part of the third quarter. It seemed that the Steelers were doing some things after the whistle, nothing super egregious where it was punches or all kinds of different things, just little late pushes, little late things that I think they were trying to goad the Bengals into doing something dumb, as they have in years past. Bengals didn't do it, and they basically just full-blown ignored it and made their first down signs, kept going, kept moving the ball. I don't know if that's something you noticed, but it's something I picked up on. Not every single play, but there were a handful of plays where I saw some of this stuff.
I'm not usually a huge proponent of like analyzing this stuff because it really is hard to tell from just watching it on TV. But what stood out to me was Tyler Boyd's first reception of the game when he was tackled out of bounds, and then he kind of got flipped over by, I believe it was Cameron Sutton. And then he got up, and then, in the past, that could be a situation where things get a little chippy, but it looked like Boyd like actually wanted the smoke, like he was ready for this moment. This is the stadium that he played college football in, and he dominated with in Pitt. He had never scored a touchdown in this place. He had one decent game there as a rookie, but he's never really played that well in the orange and black in the stadium. But he got back up, he started clapping, he was like kind of fired up. The very next play they threw at him, he breaks a tackle from Melvin Ingram and dives into the end zone. I think that in itself, just like Boyd he's a captain now. He's a bona fide leader of this team, and he kind of set the tone with how they were going to approach this game. Like, yeah, the Steelers, they're going to punch, but instead of punching back, you're just going to play better. And that is really just how the dynamic of this rivalry has to change. For so many years, I think people wanted like the Vontaze Burfict impact of it. Like, yeah, be the bigger bully, right? Just punch back because they've punched at you so much. Be the better team. That's what they were on Sunday. That's why they won.
Love it. Great synopsis right there. That's basically it in a nutshell. That's basically a great win by the Cincinnati Bengals, 24-10 over the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 3. A big win for them, the rematch coming later this season. But the Thursday night clash ahead, which we will preview in just a little bit, with the Jacksonville Jaguars providing an interesting test for the Cincinnati Bengals. We've got a State Your Case coming up. Before we get to that, John, let's tell the folks about Symbol, as if they may not know at this point, but Symbol is the stock market for sports, and you get incentives as our listeners for going and signing up for Symbol. If you use the promo code OBI, you get a free week of Symbol Gold. But John, folks can go to simbull.app/OBI and invest in teams, sports teams like their stocks. So if you play the stock market, fantasy football, survival football, I would think, John, that this is a no-brainer.
Absolutely, man. Symbol is the stock market for sports, which allows you to trade sports teams just like stocks. And when they do well, you can earn cash payouts when your teams win. You can hold on to them in case they want to win a Super Bowl or two and watch your dividends increase, or you can cash out for some type of a short-term game. Symbol has blended sports and the stock market to offer you a new way to invest in and profit off of your favorite teams without the high fees and high losses of gambling. It really is a paradise for people with advanced sports knowledge to leverage that knowledge and make a lot of money. I've been unfortunately locked out of my Symbol account the last couple of weeks, but I had to reset my password. So we have a 3-week outlook on what the Sim Bengals market looks like. After they beat the Minnesota Vikings, their price skyrocketed from $54 to $65, and then it dropped down to $59.95 after the embarrassing Chicago loss. But it's flatlined since then, even after the impressive win over Pittsburgh. So if you consider this kind of a low for what you expect the Sim Bengals price to be, get in on that. And if you want to invest in other teams, they have every NFL, MLB, NBA, and college football team on the market. So definitely get in on some of this fun. But before you do that, definitely go to simbull.app. That's simbull.app, simbull.app/OBI. Use the promo code OBI to get a free week of Symbol Gold. It helps us out too. So get in on this action with that incentive.
Man, I know some of our listeners got in on the ground level of investing in the Cincinnati Bengals when we first partnered with Symbol. And man, they've probably like tripled or quadrupled their money at this point in time. So go check that out. We've got a State Your Case coming up.
So let's put that offense back into the spotlight for this week, because last week it was the topic of conversation. What the hell happened against the Patriots? Why was that offensive line so putrid? Why were they not throwing the ball when they should have? Why were they not attacking downfield? After another win with similar offensive production like it was in week 1, some of those questions started to subside, which is kind of how this analysis goes, right? Depending on the results of the game is how critical we are with the decision-making from the coaching staff. But again, kind of saw very similar things, not as dependent on playing and throwing the ball out of empty sets, there was more help in pass protection for Joe Burrow. And I think that made a difference, even though the Steelers had some injuries with their pass rushing unit. But overall, they still leaned on the running game a lot. They had a perfect run pass ratio. I think it was like 18 and 18 for both of them. And it was one of Joe Burrow's most efficient games of his career. He had 3 touchdowns and only 1 interception. And they attacked the Steelers secondary down deep earlier in the game than they did against the Bears. But I think, like we talked about in the second half, when the offense kind of stalled and they had basically 3 straight 3-and-outs, a lot of it goes back to that conservatism in this overall scheme, in this overall plan of attack here. And through 3 weeks now, they lead the league by a long shot in first and second down run rate, and that is typically not very good. And if you want an efficient and high-powered offense, so now we're in week 4. And not only are the Bengals 2-1 now, but I think also we didn't really talk about this with the Steelers stuff. Joe Burrow did in many ways look like his old self, not just throwing the ball, but also making plays in the pocket and actually calling his own shot and getting that draw play out of empty and almost picking up a first down there. But taking on a Steelers defender in the second level and taking on a hit like that, I think that was an eye opener for the coaching staff and his fellow teammates to say, like, okay, this guy is starting to feel himself again. This guy is starting to get more comfortable with this new knee. Going off of now 3 tough defenses, they're entering a stretch here where they have the Jaguars, the Packers, and I think the Lions in like 3 straight weeks. All 3 of those defenses are not very impressive. They should have no problem passing against all 3 of those defenses. So one could say that this Thursday night would be the start of the offense kind of opening up more, because Burrow seems to be more comfortable. He seems to be more healthy, and they can finally start unleashing some of these passing concepts and not being afraid to throw the ball on first and second down, because that is so important if you want to compete with the best teams in the AFC North, or just the AFC in general. But my case with this week is that I think we see one more kind of conservative attack on a short week. I don't think anyone is necessarily afraid of the Jaguars defense right now, so I don't think that they're going to be too concerned about being aggressive against them. I think they feel confident that Joe Mixon can do whatever he wants against their rushing defense, and their offensive line is playing well enough where they can continue to do that. So I think beyond this game, we start to see the offense open up a little bit more. But I do think that with the shortened week and just with some injuries to deal with as well, I do think that we see one more week of ultra conservative game planning and play calling. And then after this, we have really all systems go. And that will just be the story of the season when we look back on this. The first 4 weeks are just getting Joe Burrow's training wheels slowly off, and then it's full pedal to the metal after that.
Hard to disagree. I'd like to see this week as a bit of a transitional week into what you're talking about. And what I mean by that is maybe, you add in the occasional wrinkle, you add in some of these screen passes and get Mixon involved in the passing game a little bit more. Just kind of, spread the ball out a little bit more and still make it high completion type of passes for Joe Burrow, but kind of, mix things up a little bit more. However, it's hard to get really disparaged or disappointed in what the Bengals have shown on offense, given what Jamar Chase has given them, given the fact that T. Higgins missed last week and they still were able to put up 24 points on the road against the Steelers defense and still be able to complete deep passes and get 5 yards per carry on the ground. I'm with you. I think we'll see an opening up of things. I do think there are a number of variables though as well. I think the Bengals still probably need to have it seems as if Jackson Carman's going to get the start again this week in place of Xavier Su'a-Filo. So I think they want to make sure that last week maybe wasn't just an anomaly with that highest pass blocking PFF score across the Bengals offensive line, that he can prove to be at least pretty consistent in the pass blocking department and, hopefully in the run blocking department as well. But that's a piece they want to probably monitor. Should he hang on to the starting job, even when Su'a-Filo comes back healthy? So, I think there's kind of some variables like that, but I do agree that this week may still be a bit of a transitional week for the Bengals offense.
It is hard just to come off of 4 days rest and play a complete game in a clean game. That's why these Thursday night games are just really wacky sometimes, and they can sometimes lead to shootouts. They can sometimes lead to defensive slugfests. The offensive line, a lot of people got upset with Pro Football Focus because they kind of graded the 5 starters pretty harshly, despite the no sacks, and I think only like technically one hit on Joe Burrow. But if you watch that game back, you see some whiffs from Trey Hopkins against Cam Hayward. You see some whiffs with Quentin Spain, even on the touchdown pass, or excuse me, the 2 plays before that touchdown. Jonah Williams almost got Joe Burrow sacked had Burrow not gotten the ball pretty quickly there. Carman and Reef both played very well in pass protection, but there were still some shortcomings with the offensive line. And you have to think that if TJ Watt is out there, he makes that big of a difference. And he probably impacts what the Bengals' protection plans were going to be. That his absence definitely helped the Bengals offensive line out a lot. So it's fair to say that, while they played well, it's not 100% on board with this unit having taken the next step against a team that they usually falter against. So this could just be one more week of just playing against a defensive line that has talent, but it's not really all built together with Jacksonville, just to see how they perform as a unit one more time. But going back to Carman, I think he's done enough at this point to just play over Su'a-Filo, because if he's going to play like this, like there's nothing that Su'a-Filo can do more than him at this point, where you don't want Carman to get those reps. And I think the biggest improvement could just be in pass protection. Honestly, I think he's just a more fluid pass blocker. He's got just better, quicker, and more nimble feet for a guy that size, and that's really what they need. And also, along with that, like, he handled a lot of the stunts that Pittsburgh threw his way very well. Like, even Riley Reef was confused at some times, but I think Carman communicated and recognized what they were doing more times than not, and that's honestly more important than anything with run blocking, because if they can't protect against some of these blitz packages that the Ravens and the Browns are going to roll out for 4 times this year, it's not going to help that much.
So when you bring this up, John, what is it you're hoping or looking for in terms of play types, play calls, formations? I mean, what are you, when you say opening things up maybe by week 5? What is it specifically? You're more pass attempts in general. What is it specifically maybe you're thinking of in terms of the Bengals opening things up?
Yeah, I would say just more passes in general. I think their vertical concepts, like they're all there right now. Like Bengals Sans on Twitter, he's really good at identifying what route concepts that Burrow and Chase like to run, and they're running this similar one from LSU. It's called the 989 concept, where they have 2 9 routes on the outside and have a bang 8 from the slot with Tyler Boyd. Like, they've gotten like 2 or 3 touchdowns on that play already this year. So like their concepts when attacking down the field, like they're already there. But I just think that in general, just being more aggressive on 1st and 2nd down. There's no real use in running the ball on 2nd and 10 and 2nd and 9. I get the theory that you want to gain like 3 or 4 yards to get 3rd and manageable, but you can sustain longer drives and quicker drives if you just aren't afraid to just let your quarterback drop back in those situations. Yes, they are obvious passing situations, and that's why when you look at passing over expectation, like the Bengals are dead last, because they're running the ball in a lot of the situations and protecting Burrow from getting hit in those situations. But I just think that you can expect better and more sustained drives if you're more aggressive on those downs, because odds are you're going to complete more passes than not, and you're going to move the ball in those situations, and you're going to keep out of 3rd and long.
Yeah, I think the other caveat with this, and we'll talk about this in the injury report as well coming up for the Thursday night game, but I think the other caveat in the Bengals opening this up maybe by week 5 is T. Higgins, right? I mean, so he's got to play a huge part in that. I mean, the Bengals were able to get by without him, but he is a huge weapon, and others were stepping up. Auden Tate had a nice catch. Mike Thomas had a nice catch last week, but they don't provide the consistency that T. Higgins does and the threat that T. Higgins does. So I think while we may see, because of a weaker secondary by Jacksonville and maybe some things to exploit there, John, I think that next week, presumably when T. Higgins is back and healthy and all of that, that's probably playing into what you're talking about.
And I think our own Matt Minnick said this really well in one of his 5 keys to victory against the Jaguars, which you can read on Cincy Jungle. It's hard to install a new game plan just 3 or 4 days in advance in preparation. I don't think that they're going to change up a lot of things just on this short week. And knowing what they did last year, like Joe Mixon ran all over the Jaguars defense, and from my knowledge, the defense hasn't changed that much. Obviously, there's a new defensive coordinator with a new coaching staff, but I think the personnel is by and large the same, and the offensive personnel on the Bengals side has only improved. So I think they look at Mixon even on like 3 or 4 days rest, saying, you better get ready for 20 and 25 more carries because there's a good chance that we're going to rely on you because we trust you against this defense.
Well, we'll see what happens there. A good case to state this week, and probably one that we will see in come to fruition, I would think, by the time the Green Bay. And of course, the other thing too is the fact that these next two games are at home for the Bengals. Them playing at home is obviously a bit more friendly for the offense in terms of noise, communication, all of that. So unless you have anything else to add to finalize your case, John, we can start maybe talking about this Jaguars game.
No, I think you did make a good point about Higgins. It's that injury is a little weird to me, considering that he, I guess, played through it against the Bears. He injured that shoulder on his last or his second to last catch. Then he came back in the game and caught a touchdown. I don't know if he was close to playing on Sunday, but you have to figure that if he wasn't playing last week, then he definitely wasn't going to play this week. So having him back in the lineup definitely changes things. But I think that their plan in replacing him was decent too. They rotated, I think, 3 receivers to replace him. Trent Irwin got some snaps, and then Auden Tate and Mike Thomas took the boatload or the lion's share of those reps overall. So I think they're in a good position to replace him for the time being, but definitely having him back with how much that he's improved and how much how much better he's looked, that definitely makes a difference too.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, basically in the first 3 games, he left the first game early with cramps, came back. Second game, had the shoulder injury, left for a little bit, came back, and then didn't play in the third game. And then as we transition to talking about this Thursday night game against Jacksonville, John, it looks like he's not going to play. Is that where we should maybe start, is the injury report that we received as of Wednesday?
Right. So because we're on a short week and we're recording Wednesday, we have the final injury report instead of the initial injury report to give you guys. Unfortunately for the bad news, Higgins will not play with that shoulder injury, as well as Jesse Bates, who suffered a neck injury when making a tackle out of bounds against the Steelers. Aside from that, I think it's Chidobe Awuzie, who is doubtful with a groin, even though I believe he was dressed for practice the last 2 days, and Xavier Su'a-Filo is also doubtful, but Zach Taylor did announce on Monday's press conference that Jackson Carman will get this start. So obviously Higgins being out is a big loss, but this is Jesse Bates' first missed game in his now 4th year. And I don't know about you, Anthony, but I know Bates has, I think, made more tackles this year in the first 3 weeks than he's had in the first 3 years of the start of those seasons. But it's kind of felt like because the rest of the defense is kind of picking up the slack from last year, we haven't really noticed Bates that much. He hasn't been making these impact plays that he's had to make over the past year because of how bad the defense has been. But I really think that this could be a case of we won't notice the impact that Bates has until he's not out on the field and they have a backup in there to replace him, even against the rookie quarterback, Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, the other thing that's interesting with this one, similar to the Higgins injury, Bates and Bell played 100% of the snaps last week. So, it's not like Bates left the game and this was kind of known. It was just kind of said after the game, oh, by the way, he's got a neck injury and now he's not playing this week. Maybe they are being super cautious with both of those guys because they know how valuable they are on each side of their respective units there. And they don't want an IR situation if they go out there and try and push it, especially on a short week. So maybe they're just being very conservative about the approach with these two. But, this one worries me a little bit, and we'll talk about, what this means for the game here. But, this one worries me a little bit because if you've got Awuzie doubtful, Darius Phillips had a hand injury. Was he back? I didn't see much on him. I think he was limited on Monday or would have been limited on Monday in a simulated practice. So he's kind of banged up. You've got Waynes coming back for potentially his first game. He is a go against the Bengals. I don't know. The secondary against a team that likes to throw the ball against a Trevor Lawrence, that is a little worrisome.
It is kind of funny, though, because the first 3 weeks, it was okay, Trae Waynes just has to get healthy so that Eli Apple can go back to the bench. And then finally, Trae Waynes is healthy, but Chidobe Awuzie could be out behind him. Right. So I don't know if that means that Eli Apple stays in the starting lineup to start for Awuzie, who did not practice at all this week. So doubtful basically means he's out at this point. Or is it going to be Darius Phillips, who I think he's limited every first practice of the week just for like maintenance issues, but this time he had like a hand injury, so
Yeah.
it's added to the laundry list of his injuries. But yeah, Trae Waynes' debut comes without Jesse Bates and Chidobe Awuzie, so we still haven't seen the full effect and impact of this rebuilt secondary, and hopefully we'll see it against Green Bay.
What expectations do you have for Waynes coming back here? He hasn't played football in basically a year and a quarter. Obviously, I know everybody's a little sour about the contract he has signed and the time he has missed. He was looking pretty good in training camp, and then he got, he kind of retweaked the hamstring, or I should say injured the other hamstring. He had 2 different hamstring injuries this offseason. So, well, I mean, what are realistic expectations in this one going up against some decent receivers from Jacksonville?
I'm not even gonna BS it. I have no idea. Like, he is like, the time between his last game and this game is basically the same as the time between Jonah Williams' last game in college and his first game with the Bengals, because he missed his entire rookie season. So I have no idea what a starting cornerback looks like off of 20 months rest. I know that the last time he was on the field, he was at best just a decent player, but the Bengals obviously have higher expectations for him compared to based off what they're paying him. But he's going against, one of DJ Chark or Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones, his second game in Cincinnati since leaving in 2016. And he's got a quarterback that's not willing or not afraid to throw the ball down the field with no regard for the secondary. So, like, Trevor Lawrence is going to be aggressive. He has been aggressive for the first 3 weeks. And Trae Waynes better stay on top of those routes because Chark and Jones can get behind him if he's not careful.
So I know we want to talk about Urban Meyer and Trevor Lawrence, and you've got some questions and statements on that. I guess since we're talking about the injury report and we're talking about Trevor Lawrence and what he brings, the talented wide receiver core, the fear I think some of us, or maybe some of us who are a little more cynical than other Bengal fans and whatnot, is the old trap game. And I spoke with JP Acosta the other night, and we, in our conversation, I kind of said tongue in cheek a little bit, like, I don't like saying trap game to other teams because the Bengals have been on the other side of that moniker for a really long time. But I mean, look, you've got a banged up secondary, a quarterback who likes to throw the ball a lot, a team that's 0-3 and is hungry to get their first win. Urban Meyer comes back to the state of Ohio. I don't know. Is this just looking too far into this thing? We're a little too close, and the Bengals are just a vastly superior team at this point? Or is this one scaring you at all?
The Bengals are a vastly superior team compared to the Jaguars, but it's still a trap game. Like, like Chidobe Awuzie, right after the Steelers game, he found a picture of all the experts picking the Steelers over the Bengals. All the experts are picking the Bengals over the Jaguars right now, not only to just win straight up, but to cover the 7.5 point spread. Like, there is no confidence in the 0-3 Jaguars to even compete against the Bengals on a short week, coming off of a very, emotional and impactful win against their arch rival. It's 100% a trap game. The Jaguars may not be good, but I think Trevor Lawrence is arguably the most talented quarterback that they're going to have played in this entire month. I think compared to Kirk Cousins, Andy Dalton, and the current version of Ben Roethlisberger, Trevor Lawrence probably has the best arm out of all of them and can make more throws than all of them. The problem is he's 22 years old and he's playing his first NFL games. He doesn't really know what he's doing yet. He's just, he's being that guy in Napoleon Dynamite. See those mountains over there? I'm going to throw him over there. Like that's basically his that's his mindset right now. And honestly, I'm kind of here for it because there's no expectations for the Jaguars this year. They might not win a single game for how bad that they're playing. It's all about just getting the mistakes out of Trevor Lawrence's stomach right now. But some of those mistakes can end up being positives against a secondary that's not going to have 2 other starters. So the Bengals better be prepared to score points because this Jaguars offense hasn't clicked efficiently yet, but there's always a time for something.
I'd like to think that the Bengals defensive front, namely the big plays from Logan Wilson, the pressure that we talked about with the Bengals defensive line, those are things that should be able to help remedy some of the absences in the secondary. But you've got a much more mobile guy especially for his size in Trevor Lawrence than you have in Ben Roethlisberger. So if the Bengals are able to generate pressure, it's going to need to not only come from, one edge player at a time or one interior player. You're going to have to get probably two or more people kind of getting pressure to be able to get the amount of sacks the Bengals have been able to generate in a lot of these games so far this year.
That's actually a really good point. Like Trevor Lawrence is a much better athlete than people give him credit for.
Yeah.
I know Ohio State fans know that for a fact. So I don't know if that changes what their plans are on defense. Do they want to contain a little bit more, or they just want to pin their ears back and pressure him as much as possible? That would probably be my expectation. The Jaguars' offensive line has done a pretty good job so far. Like their offensive line is pretty well built. But if this defensive line is as talented and as performing well as it's touted to be, then they shouldn't have an issue with confusing and pressuring a rookie quarterback.
Well, obviously, and this is a storyline you want to talk about a bit, John. There's a lot of history here between the Jaguars quarterback and current head coach and the Cincinnati Bengals current quarterback. Burrow played, obviously, under Urban Meyer for a little while and was passed over for the starting job and then went on to LSU. And then he and Trevor Lawrence clashed in the national championship back in 2019. So, I don't know. I know you want to talk about this storyline, which I'm sure will, other than the Ring of Honor, will kind of dominate this game.
Right. Like it's more than just, two number one overall picks battling out. It's two number one overall picks that have gone or have gotten to this point with very different paths. Trevor Lawrence was touted as like the next Andrew Luck as soon as he got out of Spartanburg or whatever high school in Georgia that he went to. He was the number one overall recruit, battling with Justin Fields for that title. But then Fields transferred to Ohio State because Joe Burrow ended up going to LSU after losing that quarterback battle when Urban Meyer was still there at OSU. Urban Meyer recruited Burrow, obviously, out of Athens County. And so there is history there. And I think a lot of fans would assume that Burrow is going to take that and just use it as like a chip on his shoulder because that kind of seems to be what he does, and he does it so well. But I don't know how much is going to impact this. I feel like Burrow, realizes that, things have happened probably for the best for him. Like if he stayed at Ohio State, I don't think he probably doesn't believe he's the first overall pick. He ended up in a fantastic situation with LSU, and Dwayne Haskins ended up being a first round pick as well when he won that battle. So, everything kind of worked out for the best up until I guess Haskins kind of got demoted and ousted from Washington. But, Burrow ended up in the situation that's pretty good for him at this point, and being the first overall pick is definitely not nothing. And I don't know how much that he looks at Trevor Lawrence as that guy that I beat in the national title game. He had nothing but praise to say about him in his press conference. Like he said, he's only going to get better, but he's already really good right now. So this game will draw a lot of storylines and headlines in that sense. But I don't know. I think we might have done a job of just maybe overblowing those storylines because I don't think that Burrow is going to really care that much about his former head coach that didn't like him that back then because, look at where I am now. The grass is a lot greener.
It worked out well for everybody. I mean, some cynical people are saying, with the 0-3 start, is Urban going to bail and go to USC or something like that? I don't see that happening. I think Urban is going to try and right the ship in Jacksonville for sure. One of the things I know you are a lot more adept at schemes and you do the weekly lineman and all of that at cincyjungle.com. I think you wanted to talk about the rushing offense. I don't know if you wanted to talk both Jacksonville and what the Bengals are doing with Joe Mixon and what they were able to do last week. I did, and I want to encourage our listeners. I did talk to, as I mentioned a couple times already, JP Acosta at Big Cat Country from SB Nation, and talked about the loss of Etienne in this Travis Etienne in this offense, and how Robinson has still been able to fill in things. And he says that Robinson's not even being used enough in this offense. But I don't know if you've got thoughts on what the Jags are showing from their run game and maybe what the Bengals are wanting to do with theirs.
Well, I think that is what they're doing the best, the Jaguars. Like they're running the ball pretty efficiently, even though that some of these games have gotten out of hand and they've gotten some yardage at the end of the game. Like even just looking at when the win probability is below 90% for the winning team, like Jacksonville is still running the ball very efficiently with both James Robinson and Carlos Hyde. They're both averaging, I think, at least 5 yards a carry, and they're both like, I think Jacksonville's overall rushing offense is top 5 and expected points added per play. So this is kind of the matchup of the game. I think like we have these two high-profile quarterbacks that are battling out, but it's the Bengals' top 5 rushing defense against the Jaguars' top 5 rushing offense. And on a Thursday night game when there's short rest and a lack of true preparation for this game, I think that could be where the Jaguars may end up keeping this game close. If they pop some big runs off of this defense and that has shut down Dalvin Cook, David Montgomery for the most part, and Najee Harris, if they continue to find success against them, then that could be where this game kind of opens up. But I think if you're the Bengals, you see the Jaguars offensive line that has talent. You have James Robinson, who I guess was voted in the top 100 players, I think, last year. It's a very even matchup, and I think it could be really telling of where this defense actually is because, again, it's still a question of whether or not if they are as legit as the numbers say compared to the talent that they face. But this is a legit, impressive rushing offense that could end up giving them fits.
I think a good transitional point into, keys and predictions and everything is the second part of this discussion here, which is what the Bengals are doing in terms of running the football and what they want to do. I think this is a good week. I know we want to see a little bit more of an aerial attack. I know we want to see those explosive plays. They are coming with more frequency than they did last year with Burrow, which is great to see. But I do still think, and maybe I'm just too old school, but I do still think this is a good week to commit to Joe Mixon a bit, commit to balance a bit. Short week, physical game last week against the Steelers, an emotional game last week, and your secondary is banged up. You probably want to think that the Jaguars are wanting to exploit that. I think the Bengals are going to want to maybe run the football. I don't know necessarily more than passing it, but I still think they're going to want to seek out that balance, at least for this week, like we talked about in our State Your Case. Right.
I think they know what works for them right now. Like I don't want to say getting away with not being aggressive on early downs, but the 2-1 record kind of speaks for itself, and the Jaguars are the worst defense that they are going to face so far this year. And it's, again, kind of the beginning of the stretch of weak defenses that they have on the upcoming schedule. So again, I think the short week, the lack of T. Higgins has a lot to do with this, but I think if they have to pass it, if the game gets pretty close, I think, they shouldn't be that afraid of the Jaguars secondary. But yeah, I would say Mixon's going to get fed a lot for at least one more week, and then we can kind of reevaluate where the offense stands as they enter week 5.
So what are your biggest keys this week, John? What do you think the Bengals need to achieve in order to get to 3-1, which would be really, really, and then when you're, we can go back and look at that Bears game and say, man, 3-1, this could easily be 4-0, but whatever, that's in the past now. What do the Bengals need to do to be 3-1 to end the month of September?
I honestly think that if they don't turn the ball over, they win. Honestly, like it was a little bit shaky to see Burrow kind of overshoot Boyd in the beginning of the Steelers game and have the ball be interception. You're thinking, okay, he's coming off a game where he's thrown 3 interceptions. Now he's got 1 interception out of the gate, and this time he threw 5 interceptions all last year. He's got 4 through the first 3 weeks of this season. So kind of the dichotomy of the first and second year difference there. But yeah, if they just protect the ball, I think that they should have no problem outscoring the Jaguars. They don't really have a lot of players on defense playing well. Like they have Miles Jack. They traded away CJ Henderson at cornerback. They have Shaquille Griffin. They have names, but the unit is just not playing very well right now. And it shouldn't really scare any offense that has the capability of producing like the Bengals have. Like the Bengals just have too much talent on this team to not put up at least 25 points. And I don't think that you can count on Trevor Lawrence to put up that many points consistently or just in any game, especially going up against a defense that's playing as well as the Bengals. So as long as the Bengals don't make too many mistakes on offense, they shouldn't have an issue outscoring this team.
Yeah, does anyone remember the game last year between these two teams? I mean, the Bengals were winless. They were coming off that tie with the Eagles, and you kind of felt like they were way better than their record indicated, and this was a get-right game for the Bengals, and they ultimately won. But there were a couple of things in that game that made it a lot closer than it should have been. The defense didn't play all that well. Joe Burrow threw a pick in the end zone that Drew Sample theoretically could have come down with. Miles Jack made a great play in that regard. By the way, Joe Burrow called Miles Jack the best linebacker he's gone up against, I think, at the NFL level is what he was referencing this week. So he'll be seeing him once again this week. This just screams, though, as it did last year, screams of a classic Joe Mixon big game type of thing. Some of the bigger runs, maybe getting involved a bit more in the passing game, getting in the end zone more frequently. I think that's a key. I mean, obviously all the standard things are key, blocking and getting after the quarterback, but I think some of the finer things and things that get lost in Thursday night football games, John, tackling gets sloppy, right? I mean, I think the turnover battle, like you mentioned, is huge. If the Bengals have that totally lopsided, that is a huge, huge swing for them. But I think tackling and getting, as I mentioned earlier, with Trevor Lawrence being more athletic than Ben Roethlisberger, can run a bit more. If they get their arms around him, if they grab him, they got to bring him down to the ground. We saw what happened late in the Chicago game with Justin Fields. Another athletic guy got right out of the grasp of Trey Hendrickson when he was dead to rights. It seemed that kind of stuff can't happen. And it tends to, unfortunately, on a short week. And the same thing, I mean, I'm sure the Jaguars and their defense are saying the same thing. You know, they're coming off a short week. They're traveling, which is another thing that goes against them. But it's the same kind of deal. I think some of the basics that get lost on these short weeks need to be done for the Cincinnati Bengals, and not look at this as, hey, cakewalk, and we've got Aaron Rodgers coming up in a week and a half. They need to take care of what's in front of them.
I don't have any data or numbers to back this up, but I always kind of felt like Thursday night games do end up being sloppy. But for some reason in my mind, sloppy always meant like sloppy offenses and just low scoring slugfests. But that's just not the case in the NFL anymore. Like, I had no idea that the Giants in Washington were going to produce like 61 combined points a couple weeks ago on Thursday night. Like that's just kind of how these things go. And I think you hit the nail on the head whenever you see, you know, just not really fundamental football that usually comes on the defensive side of the ball, because it's just easier to score points now. So I think initially when I thought about this game, I'm thinking, okay, it's probably going to be low scoring. I think the over under is like 45.5. So it's probably going to be the under there. But you have a banged up Bengals defense, a very bad Jaguars defense on a short week. I think we're going to see points in this game. Points are not going to come at a premium.
I agree with you. We're going to start closing up here. John, you got a prediction for us before we drop the mic and get out of here?
So I was on the Believe in Jaguars podcast. Definitely check out that episode. And my official prediction there was 31-28, but on the Bengals, of course. But on the injury report, the Jaguars do not have their kicker. I guess Josh Lambo is going to miss this game for personal reasons, and I guess he's not been kicking very well this season overall. So the host of the Believe in Jaguars told me to keep that score, but just erase the extra points. So 31-24, because they're not going to make an extra point.
Okay. I will say, so you said 31-24. I'm going to go 34-23. I think the Jaguars put up points, maybe get some garbage time yards and all that kind of stuff. Maybe make it a little interesting late, but I think the Bengals take care of the business here. And I mean, this one worries me a little bit, especially with the injuries. Don't get me wrong, but I think this is a game the Bengals should win and will if they do things the right way. And obviously, it's a big night in Cincinnati. And I guess that's where I'll go for my mic drop is, you know, we were pleased enough to have Ken Riley II, Ken Anderson, and Anthony Munoz on our program when the inaugural class of the Ring of Honor shortly after that was announced. We were able, thanks to all of our listeners, to raise over $2,000 and give it each out to each of those charities that they run. So it was a really cool month, not only to have those people on our podcast and honor them, but also the fact that we were able to help out their charities and a big week. I know they're making appearances not only at the stadium, but in various podcasts and around town. So really cool. And this is going to be the culmination of something we've talked about, John, for a couple of months here in terms of a changing of the stripes, if you will, with the Cincinnati Bengals and their organization and their honoring of past players.
Not only with the Ring of Honor, but I think the both of us are going to know like more people in that stadium than basically any game in recent memory, because you just have an entire congregation of Bengals fans sitting in, I believe, section 154, the Goodberry, the Zim, the Ace Boogies, the Commissioner Yaz's, the everyone. It's that section, and they should be rocking and rolling. So if everyone runs into them, definitely take some pictures and keep the content rolling all throughout Thursday night. It should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we've got a lot of stuff coming up on Cincy Jungle and this podcast this week, so we'll keep coming at you. John, someone had asked I think you're going to the Blind Pig tonight, so to see our buddies Jake and James who are out there, I think you are making an appearance, are you not?
Yeah, my only goal is to crash that live podcast and tell everyone to subscribe to OBI. So I will be down there.
Well, I'll be paying attention to see if you live up to your end of the bargain on that one. But tell everyone there, hey, for me, if you will, and obviously, if you are also able to go see Zim and Ace, go check out their Twitter accounts to see where they are. Pretty cool stuff that they're able to do some live shows. We tried to do that when I was there week one. Unfortunately, I was just short on time and just didn't work out. But another time for us in the future. John and I got to meet up. That's an important thing. So, hey, have a good time tonight. Have a good time tomorrow, bud. And we, I don't know. Let's hope the Bengals take care of business.
We'll see.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a good week and enjoy Thursday night football. Jaguars, Bengals.